Welcome to Break the Silence, Build the Future, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of survivors and advocates while shedding light on the pervasive issue of gender based violence. Join us on a journey where survivors find strength in sharing their stories and experts offer profound insight into this critical societal issue. Stories are powerful tools. They have the ability to connect and inspire. But they don't just impact you, the person sharing that story. They create a ripple effect that can change the lives of countless others. Welcome to Break the Silence, Build the Future. I'm your host, Fartumo Kusow. Today we're talking about the ripple effect of sharing your story. Today we'll explore how vulnerability and storytelling create connection and meaningful change, not just in your life, but in the lives of others who hear your words. Together, we will reflect on the challenges and far reaching impact of you sharing your story, which means you are sharing your truth. This episode is sponsored by We Speak Merchandise Collection, featuring t-shirts, mugs, and tote bags that help spread the message of advocacy and empowerment. Plus, 10% of all proceeds go directly to supporting shelters that help survivors of gender-based violence. Shop now and join the movement to break the silence. Now, the power of storytelling. Sharing your story is one of the bravest things you can do. It's not easy to open up, especially when you are dealing with painful experience. It requires you to be vulnerable and the courage to put your experience into words. Not only that, but invite others into your words. I remember when I started posting posters of my daughter missing, asking people, have you seen her? Do you know where she is? She went missing Friday, May 26th, and her husband of 18 years had been arrested June the 5th, and her body was found on June the 6th. So it was about 12 days, but those were the 12 longest days of my life. They felt like 1,200 years. So I decided I would go about social media, create videos, this podcast, and share my experience with the pain, the anger, and the horror of it all. And I experienced a lot of support. I experienced a lot of people giving me their condolences, telling me how they cannot imagine my pain, telling me we're here for you. When I organized vigil for my daughter, so many people that I have never met, never heard of came and participated in that vigil. People came to her funeral that I've never met. People came to her celebration of life that I've never met before. People donated. 2 weeks, we were able to raise over $20,000, which we put it into foundation named in honor of my daughter. So I had all that support by sharing my story, starting with the posters to speaking to the local media, the local TV, local papers, and sharing my story in hope of other people hearing. So I got all that positive. That was profound. But also, when you share your story, it's important to be aware of the negative that comes with it. Every time I went on social media and I posted something, every time that I recorded video and shared it, along with people who appreciated, who supported, came with the negativity, came with the people who would ask question like, your daughter married somebody outside of her culture and that's why this happened to her. Why did you get divorced? Just because you left her father, that's why this happened to her. Why didn't you send her back home, whatever that is? If you did that, this would not have happened. If she had married a Somali person, this would not have happened. People would say, why are you sharing picture of her not covered? Why was your daughter not covered? So when you share your story, for you to open up yourself and be vulnerable, people who share those negative feedback, negative comments, negative points, it's easy to see how difficult that is. It's easy to see how devastating that is. But remember, those were only 1, maybe 2% of the people that came upon my content. Only 2% at most. So if I had 10 comments, maybe 1 or 2 would be negative, or people that are asking a question, layered question, like, when did your daughter marry? Where is her father? Questions like that, that you know the answer is already in the question. It's encoded in the question. This person is not looking for my answer. This person is looking to point out there was something wrong my daughter had done. There was something wrong I had done, getting out of unhealthy relationship. That's what those people are after. And for the first couple of times, I would respond to them, explain what I meant, explain what had happened, until one listener sent me a comment saying that, Habo, do not respond to them. They're just trolls. And that was the best advice I could have ever received. I don't remember the name of that follower, but thank you if you happen upon this episode. So sharing your story is one of the bravest things you can do. And it requires on your part to be vulnerable and have the courage to put your experience into words and invite others into your world. When I first started sharing my story, I didn't realize how much it would resonate with others. I just began speaking about my daughter. I needed to speak about it because I remained silent for such a long time, for 18 years, as she struggled. So I just decided I would speak about the devastation my daughter's experience for those 18 years and her final end have wrought upon my family. The painful experience of gender-based violence. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, I questioned myself. It was painful. Was I ready to be open? Was I ready to allow those people, 1 or 2% that are trolls, to hear my story and make it more difficult? Was I ready to be so open? But as I received those negative 1 or 2%, I received messages from people who said my story gave them the courage to leave an abusive relationship, to seek support, or simply feel less alone, that they are not crazy. They are not imagining what's happening to them. By hearing what my daughter went through, by hearing how many times, 11 times to be exact, that my daughter tried to leave, and how when she finally got out, finally it was clear to this devil that she was done. It cost her her life and devastation for my family. So hearing those encouraging messages for somebody to have the courage to leave an abusive relationship, to seek support, and to simply feel that they are less alone, that is the power of telling my story. And that is the power of you telling your own story. Because stories as human have the power to connect us on a deeply human level. And it's that connection that reminds us we are not alone in our struggles. That means there is a ripple effect of your vulnerability. So when you are vulnerable, when you are okay to be vulnerable and open about your experiences, it allows other people to accept their vulnerability and be open about their story. What I have learned through this journey is that the impact of sharing your story goes beyond what you can see, goes far beyond what you can see. When you open up about your pain, your grief, and your challenges, that tends to create a ripple effect. For example, a listener once told me that hearing my story helped her find the strength to open up to her family about her own struggles, tell her family the painful relationship she was in, the difficulty she was facing. That conversation with her family led her to seeking therapy and beginning her healing journey and her desire to get out of that difficult relationship. And she told me that her story in turn inspired someone else in her life to make changes. So you can see my story inspired her to speak to her family and tell them, this is the painful experience that I'm facing. And she gained support from her family to go to therapy, to get support, to start her healing journey. And because she did that, another person in her immediate family began to make changes in her life too. This ripple effect happens, I believe, because vulnerability is contagious. When we see someone else being brave, when we see somebody else speak to things that we experience, things we thought are impossible to speak to, things we thought are shameful or embarrassing or people wouldn't understand, when we see that, it gives us a permission to be brave too. It gives us a permission to see, if this person can talk about this, I can speak to it too. So it's a chain reaction of courage that this allows people, just because you decided to share your story. Hey, listeners, I want to share something exciting. Our We Speak merchandise is here. From t-shirts that say your story matters to tote bags reminding us to break the silence, every item carries a message of hope and resilience. Even better, 10% of all the proceeds support shelters and programs for survivors of gender based violence. Your purchase helps amplify voices, spread awareness, and provide tangible support to those who need it most. Shop and join the ripple effect of change. Of course, sharing your story is not always easy. It comes with challenges of self doubt, fear of judgment, and the emotional toll of revisiting painful experience. I felt all of these things. There was moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing by being so open. There was times I thought about if this was even the right thing to do, right way to approach it, right way to explore my own deeply held painful experiences. But every time I received a message from someone who said my story helped them get out of a terrible relationship, my story helped them to speak to a sister, a daughter, a mother, a neighbor, a coworker, classmate, and say, hey, I'm here for you if you are struggling. I'm here to listen. All those messages that you have sent me, my listeners, remained a constant reminders to me of why I started. So sharing my story and allowing other people to hear my story while I at the same time honored my daughter, kept her name, and kept myself in helping others in sharing her story. I felt that outweighed the challenges and embarrassing or the negative comment that came my way. By sharing our story, in my opinion, does not only allow us to begin the journey of the new identity we are plunged into, but we also create a space for others to feel, a space for others to understand, a space for others to express their own challenges. That means we break the stigma of the need to keep silent. In my language, I was born in Somalia and came here in my 20s in Canada, but we use something called the ebb. Don't talk about that. That's ebb. Don't tell people you and your husband is hitting you ebb. Don't break your family up. So all those are stigmas that brings the blame on the victim, not the perpetrator. So we work in breaking down that stigma. We, by sharing our story and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we challenge societal norms that says it's your fault to the victim. Only if you made sure the children were clean, only if you made sure dinner was ready, only if you didn't ask him too many questions when he came back from work, only if you made yourself smaller than you were, only if you didn't question him and let him be the head of the household, only if we are breaking and challenging societal norm that tends to blame the victim. And we build a sense of community where silence once prevailed. We're going to stop this idea of keeping silent so the perpetrators can do what they wanted to and have the permission to continue their horrible acts. So the question is, how do you start your own ripple effect? How do you do that? Because I am choosing this form. I'm choosing to write about it, to record it, to share it publicly. But that does not mean you have to do it the same way. You don't need a podcast or public platform to start your own ripple effect. Sharing your story can be as simple as opening up to a trusted friend, telling them how you are feeling, what you are experiencing, the situation you're in. It could be as simple as writing in a journal and putting what's in your head on paper so you can take a break from that painful experience moving through your head. It's something as simple as joining a support group or starting a support group where three or two or four or five of you can get together and share your experiences and hopefully come up with strategies to break your silence and move away from the painful situation you're in. The important thing in all of this is to do it in a way that feels authentic to you, in a way that you can feel comfortable with. So I am telling you, as my audience, if you are listening to this episode and you are experiencing some kind of painful situation, find a way that feels authentic to you, the way you can be comfortable with. Remember, the act of sharing isn't just for other people. I'm not sharing my story and creating this podcast just for the audience. That's part of it. But it's for me too. And when you share your story, when you talk about the situation, that sharing is also for you. Because as you speak about things, you begin to demystify it. You begin to break it down. You begin to take the fear and the shame and forbiddenness out of it. It's kind of like walking into a dark room where there is no light. And even if you don't turn the light, after a while, when you stand in that room 1, 2, 3 minutes, it's not as dark as it was when you entered it. You begin to adjust your vision to the room. You begin to see the frame of the bed where the desk is, even if you don't see it clearly. So talking about it in a way that makes sense to you, it's not only for others, it's for you too. Because you are beginning to reclaim your own narrative. If the person you are in a relationship with always says, you did this, it's because of you doing this that I was yelling at you. It's because of you not doing this that I did this. If that is the narrative that you are always hearing, talking about it and presenting your own version, you are reclaiming your own narrative. You're finding your own voice and making peace with your journey. Remember that there is no destination, there is the journey. And even a smallest act of sharing can inspire you to make changes and inspire somebody else to make changes. So when you hear yourself speak to it and somebody else listens, your words might encourage that someone else that needs to take their first step toward their journey of reclaiming their own story. So I am going to remind you to never underestimate the impact and the power of your story, no matter how simple, no matter how small, no matter what format you are using to tell it. Never underestimate the power it has on changing your life and the power it has on changing the other person, at least that one person that hears it. Remember, listening is different than hearing. Some people can listen to you but never hear you out. So one person hears your story can have a ripple effect. And that one person could be you. Because when we speak to the painful experience we have, and when we write it down and read it back or say it to somebody else, we hear it too. It's very important you realize. So the ripple effect of storytelling is a reminder that we are all connected. By sharing our stories, we're not only making change in ourselves, but we create space. If I came up to you today and said, every time when my husband, my partner comes back from work, they are yelling at me for the slightest thing. And the other person hears and says, yeah, I have a similar thing too, but I didn't know how to speak to it. So you are not only speaking to your own experience and hearing it, you are creating space for that other person to find their own courage, to find their own strength, to speak to it. That's why it's very important for us to tell our story to ourselves first. So then you could have your own courage, your own strength to share it with somebody else and allow that other person to gain it and create that ripple effect. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear how storytelling has impacted your life, whether through sharing your own story or being inspired by someone else. Next time, we'll continue this journey by exploring resilience and the strength it takes to rebuild after loss. Thank you for being part of today's episode on the ripple effect of storytelling. Don't forget to check out our We Speak merchandise with 10% of proceeds supporting programs that raise awareness for survivors. Together, we're turning stories into action and creating a future where no one has to suffer in silence. Until next time, bye for now.